Braveheart Workshops, inspiring connection. Restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Live well, laugh often, love much. Join our online connection circles. Be empowered in our virtual live events. Be a guest on our podcast shows. Hire us or be hired for speaking engagements. Enhance hope, health, and healing in your lives. Creating global connections. The Connection Show, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops, live with Jill Reynolds. The Connection Show, inspiring connection with hope, health, and healing in 2021, sponsored by Braveheart Workshops in Live with Jill Reynolds. Joining me today is Linda Kroll from the Chicagoland area. Welcome to the show, Linda.
Thanks so much, Jill. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Well, we are grateful that you took time out of your busy day, Linda, and I'd love the audience to know just a little bit about who you are. Linda is the author of the award-winning book, Compassionate Mediation, How to Add Passion to Your Marriage or Compassion to Your Divorce, and Compassionate Divorce, Changing the Face of Divorce One Heart at a Time. She helps individuals and couples learn compassionate communication for more peace, love, and joy in their life. As the founder of Compassionate Communication Academy, Linda provides online courses for individuals and couples to add passion to their marriage or compassion to their divorce. She's also had a certification process in compassionate mediation for therapists, coaches, mediators, attorneys, counselors, and clergy, offering continuing education credits approved by the National Board of Certified Counselors and International Coach Federation. Her lifelong mission is to reach as many people as possible with the message of self-love and compassion. Through awareness, higher consciousness, and empathy, she believes she can make the world a safer place from which to heal and transform our most intimate relationships. We can positively influence the lives of our children and create more peace, love, and joy in the world. Her primary philosophy is love is the answer, but it starts with loving yourself. Linda combines psychology and spirituality along with financial and legal information to offer a complete resource for relationship healing and transformation. And she did all of that in 1 week.
Exactly. Thank you. It took you a week to read it, but thank you very much.
Well, it's amazing. As we become more mature, we have a longer and longer bio to share with the world, don't we, Linda?
Exactly. Well, thanks for sharing all of that. I really appreciate it, Jill.
Well, Linda, one of the joys of doing the Connection Show with my guests is the surprise of the show. So I love surprises. And so I believe that in life, story is so impactful. It shares so much of who we are. And so I believe that with story, it's so cool to connect dots in our lives and to see where those dots lead to. So on the Connection Show, Linda, we love our guests, if they're willing, to become more transparent with the audience and connect the dots back into little Linda's life and share with us what it was like for you growing up and how your life led you to where you are today.
Oh, great question. And one that I've thought a lot about and have invited some in my community to ponder, because I think it's really important to get in touch with the origin story and understand ourselves better. So mine started with being the first of 2 children born to 2 wonderful parents, but my father was manic depressive, undiagnosed. So although he was very funny and very loving, he was also very loud and very angry a lot of the time. So there was a lot of yelling going on in my very little house. And from the age that I could write letters, I would leave them on the kitchen table, inviting my parents to talk nicer to each other.
Mm.
And 60 something years later or more, I finally written things that people are reading and responding to with the same hope that they're more compassionate. So I had a great family of origin. I had a great extended family. I was surrounded by love, but I grew up to be a functioning codependent, meaning I was afraid of my father's anger. I was afraid of my anger. Eventually, I married a wonderful man, but I was afraid of his anger. And I married my college sweetheart. And about 20 years into the relationship, when it was headed for divorce for some irreconcilable differences, because I was afraid of anger and speaking my truth and setting boundaries, our separation went on for about 10 years. And then we finally got divorced. And it led me to create the Compassionate Mediation program so other people didn't have to suffer through the typical adversarial divorce. So that's some of the dots. I could go on, but I'll take a breath and let you focus in on whatever you'd like.
Well, I appreciate you starting us off with that because I'd like to go back a little bit more on this topic. One of the things I experienced myself, Linda, and that will bring us back to your topic, is in the 80s. I had the unbelievable privilege of going to my first ever um, Adult Children of Alcoholics conference in Nashville, Tennessee, with the who's who in recovery. Claudia Black was there, John Bradshaw, Patrick
Mm,
Carnes, Judy Hollis, just to name a few, Sharon Wegscheider Cruz. And while I was there, the one they recorded it back in the days of the little tapes, that tape recordings of conferences, and the one talk that rocked my soul, and I'll never forget it, which connects back to you, was a tape called Codependency in the Looking Good Family.
mm.
And over the years, as I've had people share story, and most recently doing the Connection show, and when I hear people start off with, I grew up in a really good family. Everything looked good, smelled good. The first thought that comes to mind is, aha, codependency in the looking good family. So as we go back a little bit more with you, you mentioned dad, and then you mentioned codependency. Could you go a little deeper in what codependency in the looking good family looked like for you?
Absolutely. And we're so on the same wavelength, Jill, because we both, share the same thing with our people that we want to help understand this. I define codependency. Well, first of all, codependency was my master's thesis. So I've read all those books. I've read all those authors. I'm very impressed that you got to meet them all because they're all my idols. And of course, Melanie Beattie with Codependent No More and Beyond Codependency. But the way I describe codependency started in the 80s in relation to alcoholic families and the need for taking care of other people's needs because the addict was mercurial and children had to learn how to keep them happy. So the answer was your needs don't matter, take care of other people. And the way I describe codependency is a continuum where we're all codependent on some level. We're all givers, caretakers, nurturers, but where it becomes a problem is where taking care of other people's needs takes precedence over taking care of our own. And we're people pleasers and we're perfectionists and we have trouble setting boundaries and we have trouble saying no and we have trouble with conflict. And we have an external locus of control where we're looking for other people's approval instead of an internal locus of control where we know our worth. So aside from doing a master's thesis on it, because my father was not an alcoholic, he was manic depressive, was the same kind. But I love what you said about the looking good family. I have a cartoon that I often share, and it's a convention with one person in the audience, and the speaker's on the podium, and there's only one person, and the banner says, Convention of Children from Functional Families.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
So what I call it is, you call it the need to look good. I would say, is the perfect family. And that has its own pressure because you're supposed to be perfect and look perfect and act perfect. So yes,
And,
there's
and,
always
and, and you're not supposed to tell anyone in the neighborhood that your family isn't perfect. So
right.
you grow up that with that functional family that you never let anybody know dad's a manic depressant, and you always mask the dysfunction so you can always look as though you're in this looking good family, because
Right.
to go to that other level and reveal to anyone that this isn't looking like what you think it's supposed to is too painful. So I think we have to sometimes just go inside as children and have this the perfect family, the perfect family that manifests. I think that a lot, that's what I've seen anyway, over the years. I believe, and and I can even say, and I lived in probably one of the most dysfunctional families you'd ever want to live in, and yet as a child, I thought it was perfectly normal. I had no idea I was living in a dysfunctional family. I didn't have a benchmark. So I
Right.
think that's why I love that term, the looking good family. It's
Yeah.
funny you said that, you did your thesis on this, and when I told you about this event, um, the beauty of this event, and I believe Melody Beatty might have even been at this one truly back then. Um, Sharon Wegscheider Cruz and Virginia Satir was there with Sharon's husband, and it was the first week they introduced sculpting the family. Linda,
Wow.
they actually did a sculpt of the responsible child, the clown, the
Okay.
mascot, and the scapegoat, and had people in the audience, and it was the first time. And who in the wildest dreams would ever know that this would become the thing for the therapist for the future,
Right.
that I was present, and it was amazing. The one thing that your definition I love, and the one that came to me years later, Linda, I had the privilege in 1992 to go to treatment for codependency when insurance covered it. And the one definition I got was when we allow people, places, or things to become more important than ourselves, we're in the midst of codependency. So again, looking back at your life,
Right.
if you wouldn't mind, the way that I saw that was people are obvious because we know that when we're codependent of a person. But let's go deeper for the audience, Linda, with this. Of places can be church, we can be codependent of church, where you go to church 7 days a week, or your job, you become codependent of your job. But then the things I think you can be codependent are drugs and alcohol and sex and gambling and food and shopping. The things become more important. So as you grew up in this family with manic depression, did any things or places become more important than yourself?
Well, certainly sugar was helpful. That was probably my go-to drug. Work was something I used a lot to fall into, so I wouldn't have to think about the feelings. And trying to be the perfect mother and perfect wife and perfect daughter took up a lot of my time for a very long time.
Mm.
And it was only after I realized that there is no such thing as perfect and that authentic is much better, which is an ongoing lesson that I keep learning at 74 almost. So it's the process. I think once we're codependent, we're always codependent. We're always going to have that tendency to worry what people think of us, want to be liked, want to come across as not needing, not asking for help, independent, able to do it ourselves. And I think in many ways that's kept me more isolated than I needed to be. I'm also an HSP, which is a highly sensitive person. So I spend a lot of time alone, and I'm not totally introverted, but it's part of the makeup a little bit. So I think that had I not been as codependent, I would have been much more free to get out there and do more things or show up differently. And that's what I'm doing now. Finally doing that.
So you have had some amazing training, and I've been very inspired by your work over the years, just following you and seeing you on social media and things. Can you share with the audience some of those phenomenal modalities of recovery that you've been able to use in your own personal life that I feel makes you an amazing person, of a helping person today?
Oh,
Because
thank you.
I don't believe you could be as good at what you do if you hadn't done your own work. I just don't believe that.
Thank you. Not only have I done it, I continue to do it. It's a continuing process, but I have been blessed with many wonderful mentors. My history was that I became a lawyer right out of uh, college. Then I became a mediator when my marriage was looking like it was going to end. And then I finally found my happy degree when I became a licensed clinical professional counselor. But then I met Dick Schwartz. And 35 years ago, he did a meditation where we took ourself up a mountain and all of our parts got to stay at the base of the mountain. And I thought, I'm home. I'm home. I understand what self feels like. I understand this deep connection to source or spirit or God or inner wisdom or whatever is inside. And I recognized that I had so many parts that I had hidden as a child. I exiled my anger and my sadness and my fear. And I managed by being pleasing and caretaking and trying to be smart and happy and upbeat. And when I got extreme, my health either got challenged or I probably isolated a lot or whatever I did, but I wasn't living my life as much from self. So for 35 years, I had the honor of going through level 1, 2, and 3 with Dick. I was an assisted trainer. Everything I do right now, both personally and professionally, talks about being in self, having that self leadership where we're coming from that calm, compassionate center that Dick talks about. He's got 8 C words: calm, clear, compassionate, connected, creative, curious, confident, and I'm sure I'm missing one, but you get the idea, and compassionate. So I've always done well professionally being in self. Personally, it's a challenge, of course, because our families trigger us. I like to say that my daughter, my older daughter, was the only person that ever interned with me. And I was doing a mediation and she was watching. And at the end of the mediation, where I was very much in self, she came up to me and said, "Why can't you be like that more often?"
Wow.
So, so there's a,
Whammy, right? The whammy.
right there, right there. So whole different energy there. But then after studying with Dick and many of my wonderful colleagues at IFS, I had the opportunity to study with David G. and other members of the Chopra Center. So I went out to the Chopra Center over 5 years to bring meditation, yoga, and Ayurveda into my training. I'm also trained in Reiki and thought field therapy and a few other things. So hypnotherapy, I blended all that I've learned and continue to practice it with the help of the mentors that I still look up to. I also was very busy with SARC for a very long time. Susan Area Rainbow Kennedy, who's an author and a group leader and a writer and a wonderful human being. And she talks about the inner wise self and how we love our parts and turn in the direction of our parts and ask our inner critics to find something else to do. So the whole sculpting, the whole unburdening process of IFS has informed everything that I do. So I'm glad you gave me a chance to give a shout out to some of my mentors, because
There. And I love that work, and that's been my saving grace of my life as well. And I think that's where you and I have just such a soul connection with this. For the audience who don't know the terms like you and I do, because
yes,
we've been around it, can you break down a little bit more for the audience what you refer to as self and what you refer to as parts, so they know what that means to them?
thank you. I actually I have this on an easel in my office and I have it on a handout. So if any of your listeners ever want it, I can send that to them. But I describe self as that calm, compassionate presence that we have. And I usually ask them, we're usually in self in just moments. Do you know those moments? Because we're not always in self. When we're in self, we're calm, clear, and compassionate. Now, if someone's a spiritual person, and I often ask my clients if they have any vernacular, it's kind of like, well, do you believe in anything spiritual? Yes, I believe in God. Okay, it's when God is within you. And if they don't believe in God, it's how you feel in nature. But it's that sense of being a witnessing presence without the judgment, without the noise in our heads, and just being present, conscious awareness. And in IFS terms, it's the 8 C's that I mentioned. In Chopra terms, it's higher consciousness. It's instead of existing on the level of consciousness where we're just sleeping, dreaming, waking, walking around, we transcend that when we meditate and get to this place where we connect to our spiritual source and can actually bring that energy back into our life. So there's a higher consciousness, a witnessing awareness, a peaceful center. That's self. Deep breath here. Now I'm going to describe parts. And IFS describes them as exiles, managers, and firefighters. But after 2011, I stopped using firefighters. I use extreme parts because that's what I call it. So I tell people that the exiles are the parts we learned in childhood weren't going to get our needs met. So if we felt sad or scared or hurt or vulnerable, we pushed it aside. We didn't want to show that to the world. And from my perspective, you know, when I was scared that my father was yelling and sad that that was going on in my house, I didn't want to show that to people. So I pushed it aside. But I think exiles are the ultimate inner child feelings. What about me? Who's going to love and care for me the way I need? But we don't deal with those. We push them aside. And when we do, they build up energy that comes back to get us if we don't go back and take care of those exiles. So the way we deal with the exiles is we learn how to manage. And we go out in the world. And for me, I was pleasing and caretaking and smart and happy. And some people are sarcastic or angry or judgmental. There's a lot of different ways to manage. But Dick talks about having a pseudo self as a way to manage, which means we have a part that looks like we're in self. It's kind of a spiritual manager, but it's not really dealing with the feelings underneath. So we have a pseudo self. So when the managers are trying to douse the flames of the exiles, when we start to live our lives where we're feeling hurt, we're feeling sad, we're feeling scared, we're feeling angry, if we had to exile that, many codependents exile our anger because it wasn't safe to be angry. For me, I did that. So instead of managing, we go into behavior patterns that numb us. So in IFS terms, it's the firefighters dousing the flames of the exiles. But in my terms, it's any reactive behavior that we can focus on that keeps us from focusing on the exiles. For instance, if I would go binge late at night and then regret the fact that I had done it again, I could spend the next evening, the rest of the evening, feeling guilty about the fact that I had binged, but I didn't go back and look at what the feelings underneath were that made me want to binge. You know, what was I not attending to? So when you're in self, deep breath again. There's 2 ways to get to self. One is to acknowledge your parts and help them unburden so that you have access to the light inside of each of them. And another way is direct access, where you breathe, you meditate, you pray, you go out in nature, and you have more direct access to self. So I hope that clarifies it a little bit.
Yeah, I'm going to reach back here for a minute because, Linda, you know, I've done quite a bit of work with Dick. I mean, doing the stuff that Dick has done and going to
Right.
his trainings and doing my own personal work. I'm seeing here for just, and yesterday, it just so happens, yesterday, I did an IFS session with my therapist on Zoom. And it was a whole different one this time. And I'll share because I think it really speaks to what you said. So one of my deepest exhale parts, my deepest exhale part was never being wanted. I wasn't, from the moment I was conceived, I was not wanted. And so later I saw, as I grew up, it manifested in feel like times when I, as a little girl, 5, 6, I would sit on the stairs waiting for my mother to come home, hoping that she missed me, and then she'd walk in the house going, "Jill, where are you?" And I'd go hide in a closet so that she'd come looking. And when she never did, it just exasperated me that I wasn't wanted.
Right.
So I knew I had this part of not being wanted. I knew I had this part that waiting was real painful for me. But what I didn't know until yesterday, I didn't know how they had merged together all the way into the womb. And so it was very fascinating, Linda, to see that I could see like a light of my head, but a blackness of my body that represented the sperm meeting the egg and being conceived. and that the head was wanted in the back, or excuse me, the head was wanted because God created me in the womb, but the back part of my body was not wanted, the energy of my mother. And so I saw myself in this womb, in this waiting of 9 months. Isn't it amazing how we're in the womb for 9 months?
Yeah,
And what kind of parts form inside the womb?
exactly.
I find that fascinating, what parts form in the womb. And so in the womb, I started to take on this exhale part of waiting. And I didn't know they had merged together, the not being wanted and the waiting. And so then as I was delivered into this world, I would actually cry myself in the crib for a long period of time as I would wait for my mother to come to take me out of the crib to hold me and feed me, and she never did. So it
Mhm.
merged this not being wanted in this waiting to the point that then this other part, which we'd probably call it the fire dismissive part, came in, that I would be dismissed because no one would come to me. And then the other parts that came in, of course, was anxiety and fear. And then I managed it through this angry cry and despair. And it was just so, I'm getting goosebumps everywhere. So it was like such an unbelievable IFS session of just,
Yeah,
you know, and when you can get to that really deep self, all the way back to the womb, it is just amazing. But what really blew my mind away of doing this is how much I reenact that every day of my life with my husband. He will sometimes come out and want to, he's in his office, I'm in mine all day working, and he'll come out many times and he'll go to say something to me and I'm busy, and I immediately go into my dismissive part, and then I get angry, and then I'm like, can't you wait? And then I project, well, you're not wanted right now. And so it's like all my stuff just gets thrown at him. And I don't know, I'm in my little child. But this is what parts work is. Wouldn't you agree, Linda? I mean, that's
I
a,
would definitely agree. And I would encourage you to remember that he's got a part that has just been dismissed. And then it helps us, or it helps me when I do that, come from my higher self and have compassion for the part in my partner that's just like me. And the inner child is loved in a way that meets both your needs. So I'm sure you're doing that too with your husband when
yeah.
you
Well,
recognize
the
that.
second this session got over yesterday, I immediately went into his office and sat him down and read it to him. And I said, "Oh my gosh, honey, I'm so sorry. I can clearly see what I've been doing." And
That's
it's like,
love.
I really need to like focus on this. And it's like, so to help the audience, this is what my therapist said, but I'd love for you to share. She said, Jill, now it's so imperative that you got in touch with this. It's so imperative to every day go to that little baby and let it know that it doesn't have to wait anymore for you, that you're wanted. So she said, can you give it some clarity of what to do? And I said, wow, I guess I could go to it every day and say, it's been 4 hours, it's time to eat. You don't have to wait, I'm going to feed you now. Or, oh, it's getting late, it's time to go to bed, I'm going to help you and get some rest. And so it's almost having to go back to this child who was never cared for and re-care for it so it doesn't have to sit there and constantly wait.
Absolutely. And the corollary to that is once you've unburdened the burdens of your parts, I like to say they carry their own wisdom in life. So that little baby can be an unburdened asset of you who knows how to ask for what she needs, who knows how to uh, put herself out there, who knows when to go to sleep and when to eat, and can remind you. So it becomes a synergy between your healed parts and your higher self. You get to the self in the part, and they then can remind you how to play or how to be young or how to be fun.
So you don't have to constantly be a little child to go back. You can start to merge it together as an adult.
Exactly. You merge it together and you take the best aspects of what they bring because they're no longer carrying the burdens. And a lot of the burdens that they're carrying weren't just yours. You were carrying the burdens of your family. You were carrying legacy burdens.
Mm-hmm.
So your mother was probably dismissive because on some level she was dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great IFS process where you take the inner child in yourself and you put your parents in front of you, and then you put your parents, their parents behind them, and their parents behind them, and their parents behind them, all the way to the horizon. And you give back the energy that's no longer yours and wasn't yours. So you give back their judgment and their lack of nurturing, and they turn it around and give it back to where it came from. So no parents are harmed in this exercise. And eventually God or the universe takes that energy and transmutes it. But then you fill up with the qualities you lost when you were carrying their energy. So you bring back more peace and more calm and more joy.
Yeah, you bring back it. Yeah, and thank you for ending it there, because
Yes.
a lot of times people think legacy burdens is just taking the junk out. You got to bring in the blessings. You got to
Yes.
bring the blessings back in generation. Bless your great grandmother, bless your grandmother, bless your mother, and bless yourself, and then bless your children with all of the wonderful things that maybe were missing over those years because of the burdens.
Right.
Wow.
That you didn't have access to. I
Yeah.
like to think we have everything we need. We just don't always have access to it. So,
Access to it. So, Linda, in closing here for a transition, again, I was inspired this year, just feeling the heaviness of the world this year and in 2020, of how important it is for us to have hope, health, and healing in our lives and in the world. So, I have a hard time sometimes understanding definitions. So I go right to the good old Webster, and I guess it's Google today. And so I looked up the definition of hope, and it says to cherish a desire with anticipation, to want something to happen or be true, like hoping for a promotion, hoping for the best. There's also the spiritual context in the Bible of hope that says, like, expectation of what God has promised, and its strength is in His faithfulness. For you in your life, Linda, what does hope look like for you in 2021?
great question, Jill. I think what hope looks like to me is to truly manifest inside of me the God energy that flows through me, and to help everyone else do the same. And like I said, it's not that we don't have a self, we just need to remember we do. So I like one of my programs talks about going from hope to health to healing to happiness, because it's knowing that no matter what has happened in your life, no matter what your family of origin is, no matter what you learned along the way, no matter what your beliefs are or your fears are or your experiences, that you have this core self that is pure, that is light, that is divine. And the more we go tap into that, and remember, we're not just the drop in the ocean, we're the ocean in the drop. We're humans, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. The more we tap into that self energy, the more hope opens up, because we're present to the possibility of compassion and all those wonderful ways to relate that we don't always remember to do. So I think the short answer would be hope would be being in the flow of our spiritual self presence and helping others do the same with love and compassion.
Thank you. That was beautiful. Health, the word health. In the dictionary, health is defined as physical, mental, and social well being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. But in the biblical sense, they talk about health as being defined as 7 areas of abundant life, which are spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, financial, occupational, and social. Each area is connected to all the others. What does health mean to you?
Well, I've done some of those wheels where all of those aspects are on it. You're supposed to judge yourself on how 1 to 10 you are on those, and I've often fallen on some. I think what health means to me is when we have a union of body, mind, and spirit, where we put our needs to take care of ourselves with what we put into our mouth and what we put into our minds, and what we allow ourselves to remember about who we truly are. So I think health is not just the absence of symptoms, but the positive energy that you can give your body, mind, and spirit when you're connected to your true self.
Awesome. And the last but not least is healing. Healing in the dictionary says to make free from injury or disease, to make sound or whole, like healing a wound. Um, Biblically, it talks about healing as like, heal me, O God, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved. For you are the one I praise. And the people all tried to touch him because the power was coming from him and healing them. How does healing manifest in your life? What does healing mean to you?
Well, as someone who's had 6 cancers in the last 6 years,
Mm,
healing has been God's way of gracefully allowing me to live through all of that. So physically,
mm,
there's healing. Emotionally, I think it goes back to unburdening our exiles and the parts of us that are carrying burdens, either our own or legacy burdens, and being able to live our lives as positively and hopefully and compassionately as possible, and filled with peace, love, and joy. I think that's what healing's about.
And I'm glad you just said what you did, and thank you so much for your transparency because just as you said that, I look at you and I speak to you and I completely forget that you're a survivor and healed from cancer. You manifest such unbelievable grace and beauty. And I
Thank
look
you.
at you, Linda, and it's like, I don't see any part of you that looks like you could have ever had a disease, let
Thank
alone, And so, if you wouldn't mind, just for a few moments, can you just share for those who struggle with health issues, what what some of that journey looked like for you, just as we come to a conclusion for hope, health, and healing?
Well, thank you for asking. It's not something I normally share, mostly because I don't want to use it as a form of sympathy or something like that. But in terms of helping other people, for sure. I think because I've had stage 4 lymphoma and stage 2 breast cancer and chemo and radiation and a few other things. I've had actually 12 surgeries in the last 6 years.
Mm,
And each time I was challenged, I actually said the Lord's Prayer through every procedure that I went through. And I would often repeat it. And sometimes I said, I don't like to give myself a kinahora, as they say in Yiddish. I don't want to call on anything bad to happen. But I often said I did cancer better than I did life because I truly turned my life over to God when I was struggling. And each day became a gift. And I wasn't worried about what was I producing or not producing or earning or what was needed to be done on my to-do list. It was just how could I show up and take the best care of myself with the infinite gratitude I had to everybody that loved me, that surrounded me with love. So I was buoyed by everyone, my children and grandchildren and siblings. I had cousins that did a chain and took care of me over one summer. They came in town. So I was blessed to really be cared for. But I think the thing that got me through the most was truly a belief in God and always asking for the highest good to happen. So if it meant that it was my time to go, I knew that I had lived a very happy life, but I never felt that it was. I always felt that I've had great doctors, they had great options. God had created those options for me to take. It was just a matter of following them. And that maybe someday my journey would help somebody else know that it's all possible. So, for any of you who are struggling or facing a diagnosis, it's not the end of the world. It feels like the end of the world. I mean, the first time you hear the word cancer, it changes your world. And each time after doesn't help either. But it's all, I guess it's all survivable in whatever form we're meant to survive. So, to the extent that I've been blessed with actually healing from all of the cancers that I've had, I'm so beyond grateful. And knowing that, life could end at any time, there's just a sense of daily gratitude, daily joy, and wanting anybody that's suffering to hold on to the hope, as you mentioned, that health is possible, that healing is going to happen. And the more you truly believe that in your body, mind, and spirit, that's what changes the energy within you and the energy surrounding you and actually makes it happen. So thanks for giving me a chance to share that with
That's
people.
just so beautiful. He's not finished with you yet. He's got
No.
there's more to your journey here on this earth. Here on this
Amen.
earth. Amen.
Amen. And
Well,
yours too and all of ours.
yes. I'd love for the audience to take a peek, and I'm trying to move my mouse just a second. It's not cooperating. Over to your bio. Oops, just a second. Here's Linda's bio, which has her website on it as well. So you know how to reach out to her and her books that you can get. And this will be on the YouTube channel as well as on my website as well to reach out. In closing, Linda, I always like to close on a little bit of a fun note because sometimes we get heavy on the connection show.
Yes.
What is one fun fact about Linda Kroll? One fun fact.
Oh, are you ready? Here we go. I describe myself as an ADD HSP NUT. So what that is, I'm a little ADD, attention deficit disorder. I have 100 things going on in my head at the same time. I'm definitely an HSP, a highly sensitive person with clothes and lights and overwhelm. And NUT is basically self-explanatory.
You're nutty as can be.
Nutty as can be. Nutty as can be.
And in this crazy, nutty world we're living in today, with people trying to censor us, which is totally insane, if someone censored you today, Linda, and said, you can't have any apps on your cell phone anymore except 2, what are your 2 must-haves?
I have to take camera of my grandchildren, take pictures. And I think I have to have, do I have to choose between text and WhatsApp?
Anything on your cell phone that you need, like if an email, a texting, any of that.
Oh, probably. Oh, I guess email. Nah, text. Maybe WhatsApp. Wait, WhatsApp. I talk to my family in Israel. So
awesome.
It's all about family. Whatever connects me to my family, that's what I love.
Yeah, I agree. Nice. Family is the best. And when that FaceTime comes across and my little grandkids call me, yes. and one of the words out of their mouth is, Grandma, I just had to call you today because I really miss you. I'm like, oh, you don't know how much I needed this today.
Exactly. That's what I tell them. That's what I tell them. They're the best.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Linda, for coming on the Connection Show. It's just an honor to get to know you better. And thank you very much.
Thanks for all you do, Jill, and thanks for having me. It really was fun and a pleasure and a privilege.
Thank you so much. And audience, I just wanted to remind you that we do our connection circles on the 1st and 3rd Wednesdays of every month. So if you have time, jump on with us on the connection circles. And we're excited to announce that August 20th to 22nd in the beautiful Ozark Mountains of Branson, we are going to be doing an inspiring connection event called Hope, Health, and Healing in 2021. And we've got 18, I know it's crazy, wonderful speakers that will speak over that weekend. So come to Branson, get out of Dodge, enjoy the sun and the fun and the plays. There's so many great plays. Right now we've got Dancing Queens and Anthems of the Rock and New Jersey Nights playing in Branson. So get away and come to Branson and come to our conference here in Branson. So thanks again, Linda, and thanks everyone for joining the Connection Show. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for joining us on the Connection Show. Let's connect now. Let's restore, renew, and reconnect in community. Enhance connection in our online connection circles. A place to meet up, gather, and feel welcomed. To join us, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Click on the Books Podcast tab, and then the Connection Circles drop down. On the pop-up, join our Connection Circles Facebook group. Our circles meet from 8 to 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Share story, topics, and laughter with men and women. To learn more about Connection Circles, go to braveheartworkshops.com. Thanks for joining us on the Connection Show, and have a great day.